Guys, welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today is going to be a great episode with Eli Wilder. We're going to be talking about the Black Canyon, the Gunnison River that runs through the Black Canyon in Colorado. And we're going to be talking specifically about the Salmonfly Hatch that's about to go off here, say in the next 30 days. And it's an epic hatch. There's salmon flies that are hatching all over the West kind of during this 3 week time, but the Black Canyon of the Gunnison is a very, very special place, and it's down in the bottom of a canyon. And Eli's going to shed a bunch of great light on this hatch and the fishing conditions there. But before we get to that, I want to thank you guys, specifically the listeners. Thank you for all the loyal support. And I want to encourage you guys to reach out to me and send me your questions, send me your comments. If you've got anything to ask or to tell me, or if you got pictures of successful hunts or fishing trips, feel free to reach out. I love it. Send the questions or comments or photos or what have you to jscottoutdoors@gmail.com. Also, if you follow me on Instagram at jscottoutdoors, you can send me direct messages on Instagram, and that's usually a great way to get a hold of me. And I just appreciate all the support that you listeners give this podcast. I want to also thank the sponsors of this podcast, and particularly Kuiu Ultralight Hunting is a sponsor of the podcast, and the Kuiu Mobile Showroom, the Kuiu World Tour, is kicking off in Medford, Oregon, May 25th through the 27th at Rogue Valley Mall. And this is your chance to experience hunting's most innovative brand. You're going to get to see the complete Kuiu product line. You can ask questions, you can try on stuff, you can touch it, you can feel it, try packs on, try boots on. Make sure the sizing is right. So if you've wanted to get your hands on the Kuiu product, this is your chance. So Medford, Oregon, May 25th through the 27th. You can also go on KuiuWorldTour.com and get the full schedule. But from Medford, it's going to be Portland, Oregon, June 1st through the 3rd, Seattle, Washington, June 8th through the 10th, Spokane, Washington, June 15th through the 17th, Missoula, Montana, June 22nd through the 24th, Boise, Idaho, June 29th through July 1st, Idaho Falls, Idaho, July 6th through the 8th, Bozeman, Montana, July 13th through the 15th, Denver, Colorado, July 20th through the 22nd, Colorado Springs, Colorado, July 27th through the 29th, Omaha, Nebraska, August 3rd through the 5th, Kansas City, Missouri, August 10th through the 12th, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, August 17th through the 19th, Dallas, 24th through the 26th, Houston, 31st of August through September 2nd, Lubbock, September 7th through the 9th, Albuquerque, September 14th through the 16th, Grand Junction, Colorado, September 21st through the 23rd, Salt Lake City, September 28th through the 30th, Cedar City, Utah, October 5th through the 7th, Las Vegas, October 12th through the 14th, Phoenix, which is my hometown, October 19th through the 21st, San Diego, 26th through the 28th, Los Angeles, November 2nd through the 4th, and then Reno, Nevada, November 9th through the 11th. Make sure to get out and check out the Kuiu World Tour, the Kuiu Mobile Showroom. And I just want to thank Kuiu, Jason Hairston, for his crew over there for supporting this podcast. I also want to thank GoHunt.com Insider. I also want to thank Phonescope.com and Outdoorsman's. And you can check the show notes of this podcast to see the different promo codes that you can get with these companies. And guys, I really appreciate your support that you give this podcast and all the great feedback that I get. Again, please send me an email at jscottoutdoors@gmail.com or follow me on Instagram and send me a message through Instagram. That would be great. Let's get right to this episode. Welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today we're going to be talking fly fishing in Colorado, specifically in the Gunnison, Colorado area. We've got Eli Wilder on the phone. Eli's born and raised in Colorado. He's 32 years old and guides for Gunnison River expeditions in the Black Canyon and also guides for Gunnison River Guides, which is a internet-based I guess you advertise through internet and based out of Gunnison, Colorado. Eli, how you doing?
Good. How are you doing, Jay?
Good. I follow you on Instagram, and I contacted you wanting to know if you wanted to chat on this podcast about the upcoming Salmonfly Hatch, which the Black Canyon of the Gunnison, as you're probably about to tell us, is a real special place. I have a little bit experience in the Black Canyon. I have gone down to the East Portal several times. I've come up from the pleasure park, but I've never actually floated the whole canyon from start to finish. I've never done the overnight trip, but I have a few friends that have done it, and it's an unbelievable fishery. From the little that I have fished it, it's something that's definitely on my list to do. Eli, where are we at? We're May 19th here, 2017, and where are we at as far as the hatch, and what are the conditions right now, and what are we waiting for the salmonfly hatch to really kick off?
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so we're waiting for, as everywhere in Colorado, we have high water right now dealing with runoff. Um, Fortunately, though, with the Black Canyon, it is all dam release, so it is controlled through the dam, so we know what the flows are going to be doing. Right now, the flows have just been kicked up somewhere around the 3,500 mark, which is full runoff. They're projected to keep bumping the flows up the next few days, the next few weeks until roughly around the 27th of May is what I heard, and then they're going to start dropping it back down. Usually, as soon as you start to see that drop, anywhere between that, and, I've fished this hatch up to 5,000 CFS, and it still fishes good. But it fishes really well between the 1,200 to 3,000 mark. It just depends on where the fish are at. But the bugs are totally dependent on the water temperature. So they will start somewhere downstream in the Delta area, just very, very dirty water down there. It's hard to fish. And once it hits the North Fork, which is usually around those first couple days of June is when it starts down there. You'll get that emergence, daily down there. And the bugs start to migrate towards the shore, which the fish absolutely follow nightly. It's kind of a big misconception. People start to fish the hatch and they fish the middle of the river and wonder why they're not catching fish. Well, the fish have followed those bugs to the shoreline, which is the funnest part about that hatch because those fish follow those bugs, and once they know they're there, that's where the fish are, and they're looking for them. But
Okay.
so
I,
that should start about the yeah. Go ahead.
I got a couple questions there. Sorry for
Yep.
interrupting. You say those salmon flies. Okay, so a salmon fly is the largest of the stone flies, and correct me if I'm wrong in any of this. And they're crawlers in that they're for people that are listening that aren't real familiar. Aren't they crawlers and they're on the bottom of the river and they crawl to the edge of the river because
Yes.
they will hatch outside of the water, unlike a lot of uh, mayflies and caddis and stuff that we fish. These bugs actually crawl to the bank, get out and dry their wings and go up into the trees. Correct? They
Yes.
and
Yes.
the
Exactly.
trout really get after them in their nymph. When they're crawling to the bank. Correct? And
Yep. Exactly.
nymphing a big salmon fly. A big halfback or something can be absolutely deadly, can it?
Yes, it can, and which is very good. And like you said, you'll get those bugs start very deep in the river system. They start down in the cobble, and even this time of year, May, April, they'll start that kind of migration towards the shore. So they'll start moving around and crawling around, and that's when those fish, take full advantage of those nymphs getting swept through the river system as well. And then
So
once they make it to shore, that's when they're not going to hatch immediately, but they'll kind of stage in that area. But once those fish kind of know the numbers of stonefly nymphs have made it to the shore, that's when the magic happens.
So Eli, would you say like, before the emergence really happens, the water, what you're saying is the flows are high. So even if the fish are seeing some big stonefly nymphs. We'll call them salmon flies.
Yep.
They may not be keyed in on them because the water is flowing so big, but as more and more of them really start crawling, do they single out and just get close to the banks and just start feeding on salmonfly nymphs?
Uh, the big fish definitely will. The big fish will definitely battle for those top feeding positions. And, some of the best times I've found for this hatch to catch some of your biggest fish is when that first emergence happens. Because those fish are looking, once they've dried out their wings in the morning, they'll be able to fly out to the water, and the vulnerable ones fall back into the water. And that's what those big fish are looking for.
So let me ask you a question. Early on when the emergence is first happening, what you're saying is the Gunnison River is dammed up at Blue Mesa, and that's you can tell me the distance, but then what you're saying is down by Delta, which is lower down the river chain by Delta, Colorado, the water is actually warmer, the temperatures are warmer, it's kind of not in the canyon, so to speak, and as the water warms, it starts there and then it works its way up the river all the way up to the dam. Is that correct?
That is correct, which
And,
it's pretty amazing that it starts, and I believe it's something like 22 miles, and I might be correct or incorrect there, but I believe that's what it is, something like that.
and how long will it take kind of on a normal year from say when you start, you know, the first emergence downstream, how long is it a week long? Is it a month long? What kind of, what can you expect?
Honestly, you can expect it pushing 3 weeks on a normal year. You can have different waves. All of us guides that guide down there, we talk about different waves. You'll get, different waves through the canyon. We call it the first wave, which is kind of what we're talking about, the original emergence. And then you'll get a whole nother wave of just where the nymphs is kind of all hatched and you have nothing but adults. And that's when the dry fly fishing is the best. And that's probably your mid-June. We shoot for that second week of June is what you might have read about, which is definitely when that kind of seems to happen.
And do you really prefer fishing the dries during this hatch just because they such violent takes and so, just voracious eaters? Or do you, as a guide, do you like nymphing and pounding fish? What is your preference? Maybe when you're guiding, and what about when you're on your personal days fishing? How do you like to fish the hatch?
I personally fish the hatch as much with a dry fly as possible. That's
So,
what the fun is all about.
so you'd rather catch one fish on a dry than 10 on the nymph, even though sometimes nymphing you can pound them, you just love to see that take on the big dry.
For the most part, yeah. And, we fish a lot when that situation occurs. We definitely kind of fish the what we call dry dropper technique with the dry with the shallow, such as a patch rubber leg. Sometimes the shallow is 12 inches. Sometimes it's maybe a little bit more, like 18 to 24 inches below. But still, fishing that really close, tight to the banks, tight to the structure, that's where those fish are going to be. And we even have techniques. And sometimes those fish just don't want to eat those dry flies as much as we want to force it. Sometimes, unfortunately, it just doesn't happen. But the fish are still right there, and they're still looking for stoneflies. So you put that rubber leg right against that bank, and sometimes you give it a little twitch like it's swimming, jig it, give it a little motion, and that can produce some of the very violent strikes. And it's almost like a dry fly eat because it's right below the surface, but not quite.
So would you say sometimes you have clients that maybe aren't, they're not the greatest casters, they haven't got the men down right, and they're kind of skating and kind of dragging their fly, and they'll actually catch fish, and they're really not even trying to, just because they're actually putting a little action on the fly?
Oh, absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Sometimes you get those big dead drifts that'll, and that's the other thing is fishing this hatch over the years of, different you'll find different techniques that produce fish more than others, and sometimes that motion, exactly, the skating technique, especially in the low light, low evenings, early mornings, can produce a lot of fish. And sometimes those fish really like that motion as well. And you can really, when nothing's going on, you pop it, skate it across the water, and it can produce some really violent strikes as well. So the beauty of the Gunnison is you never know.
Once the hatch really starts happening, let's say as far as during the 3 week period, let's say, you're kind of right in the middle of it. Is it a sun up to sun down, or is, the morning better? Is the evening better? Midday? Is there any, magic window, or is it just tie it on and start casting?
Yeah, that's a great question, because we actually deal with this a lot, especially with clients. People get down there and they want to fish all day. Most guided trips, that's how we fish. We fish 9 to 5, somewhere in there. But we're down there all day. So what we try to tell people is that the fishing is not always good during the heat of the day. The other thing we deal with in the gorge and in the Black Canyon is that it's pushing 100 degrees a lot of times during June. When you're in the canyon, it can heat up to even 100 plus, and if you're in a raft, it can be 120. So you're actually kind of pushing the limits sometimes with staying hydrated and everything. So we tend to take breaks during the middle of the day and wait for those lower lights, that cooler evening, and that can be honestly the best fishing. But when the hatch is actually on, we call it the magical 3 days or 5 days, whenever it happens, you can catch fish all day long. It does not matter. Sun up to sundown, after dark, it does not matter. They're eating.
Let me ask you a question about the Black Canyon, and is it primarily a brown trout fishery? I believe you guys had whirling disease. Just curious on, the amount of browns compared to the amount of rainbows, and talk a little bit about that, and maybe, in different parts of the river, does the size go up or down on both, the rainbows and browns? Maybe talk a little bit about where the different sizes are found throughout the river and what have you.
Gotcha. The beauty of the Gunnison is that it is, you never know. I've caught monstrous fish from the top all the way to the takeout. Honestly, on a lot of our guided trips, some of the biggest fish are caught within 100 yards of our takeout, which is kind of ironic.
Yeah.
But no, the Gunnison, definitely, I've been fishing this fishery for the last 15 years. When I first started fishing it, rainbows were definitely kind of hard to come by. As guides, we used to do competitions to see how many rainbows we could catch. And, pulling a couple here or there would kind of be good. But now through efforts, honestly, through Colorado Parks and Wildlife, they've been getting a lot of rainbows actually up in the East Portal, and milking them and, getting their fry, and then helicopter dropping them back into the canyon and into the gorge in mid-August or so, once they get about 7 to 8 inches or a little smaller. So they've actually have done a huge effort in stocking native, it's hard to say native fish, but they're actually Black Canyon strain rainbows introduced back into the canyon. And these last couple of years, honestly, we have seen a huge influx of rainbows, which is awesome to see. And the size, like I said, anywhere. That's the beauty of the Gunnison. You just never know. So it's an amazing fishery. It can hold fish. But our average fish during the hatch, like I said, you hear us talk about, the big fish take over those battles. They'll battle for the spot. And those big fish on average, will be 17, 18 inches, possibly 22, 24, even a little bigger. Biggest one I heard of last year landed was a 27-inch rainbow.
Jeez. Are the rainbows bigger than the browns, or are they roughly the same size?
It's hard to say. Usually when you catch rainbows on the drives, just because for some reason it takes a bigger rainbow because they have smaller mouths to eat those big dry flies. We kind of found out they're big quality, healthy fish, and they're eating so many stoneflies that they're just supercharged. You can get a 17-inch fish that is almost 20 inches around, and it's just unreal. You just look at these things like, how are you still eating it? And actually, a funny story too is another guide that I guide with down there. Unfortunately, sometimes these fish take the flies so deep, even with pinched barbs and everything, they just take it so violently that they'll get gilled or whatever. And unfortunately, you got to take a few home. Sometimes they get part of the game. But one of the guides, he cut open a fish's belly and he counted 150 salmonfly drives in his belly.
Oh my gosh. Now, explain that to the listener that maybe doesn't know. I mean, we're talking about an inch and a half, maybe 2 inches long, maybe even bigger on adult salmon flies, right? I mean, we're talking
Yes,
like the size,
exactly.
picture like a peanut, like at a baseball game, and it's bigger than that, right?
Exactly. It's about like, I'd kind of compare it to your middle finger, maybe your pinky to middle finger.
Yeah.
And that's about jam that into your belly, 150 of those, and that's what the fish, and they still want more. It's not enough.
I had the fortune one time to fish a Salmonfly Hatch on the Madison River in Montana, and my wife and I, kind of in early June, we hit it just right, and I think we were there for 2 or 3 days, and it was unbelievable in the morning, this, fish after fish after fish. And then as the day wore on, more into midday, they would come up and still hit it, but it's almost as if their mouth wasn't even open, but they couldn't not at least come try.
Oh, yeah.
And it almost like they just kind of lip it and then they just go down and they're not actually like taking it. And the ones that we would hook, later in the morning would be literally, you would feel their bellies and they would be so hard, like, and lumpy. You can't even imagine that they get their stomachs that full.
Yeah, it's really pretty amazing. Yeah, it feels like they literally eating baseballs.
Okay, so my next question is, so you have this emergent that starts down on, the lower part of the river, and then it works its way up. You know, do you want to stay ahead of that? Do you want to be below it? I mean, where do you, as a guide, try and focus and position your clients in the, chasing the hatch, so to speak? I know there's a real
Right.
fine line of like exactly where you want to be and kind of a timing, and maybe even pull the boat over sometimes and just kind of wait because you as a guide what. Talk a little bit about that timing.
Cool. Yeah. So there's definitely a little timing as far as the seasons go, which we were talking about a little bit earlier in the season, as far as like May, first week into June. Your best chance at hitting that hatch is going to be lower in the river system because that's where the emergence is, the warmer water. Those fish are going to be seeing those adults a little bit more and more and more every night as those stoneflies come out at night. And that's when they come out and emerge. You'll hear me talk about that a lot. They come out right at dark, literally 30 minutes, the last 30 minutes of the evening into the next hour or 2 hours of night is when all the stoneflies crawl out of the water, up onto the grass, into the cliff walls and trees and everything, and start their emergence. So you want to be kind of on the waves of those is also what I was talking about. So you'll get a big hatch overnight, and you kind of want to be right at there that next morning, because all those fresh bugs are going to catch that sun in the morning, dry their wings out, and then go start flying around looking for mates and looking for new areas. And that's when they're vulnerable, when they're on that flight. And we call that, so that's kind of another timing thing, but more focused on like a daily issue. So we'll try to time it with what we call the morning flight, which is usually when the sun is starting to hit those fresh hatched bugs. right? So those freshly hatched bugs need to dry out their wings so that they can fly, which takes about 30, 40 minutes of sun. So once that happens, you'll get a huge flight throughout the canyon. And being in a canyon at some areas is different because they call it the Black Canyon for a reason because there's so much shade down there. But so the bugs will just fly that whole first couple hours of the morning, usually starting about 9:30, 10. They'll start flying everywhere, going nuts. And the fish, like you were just talking about, those fish will go nuts, feeding on them for a while. And then usually that midday, it'll get real hot. All the bugs will kind of go lay down, lay into the shade. And then the fish will kind of lay back down until that evening. And then you'll get an evening flight where all the females will actually come back out and lay their eggs into the water. And you'll get fish starting to crush them again in that evening low light. But as far as seasonal goes, we'll take it back a step or two, back to the seasonal part. You definitely want to be keeping up with the hatch, staying ahead of it. If you don't want, if you're in it and you got flyers everywhere, you're right in it. If the fish aren't eating, it's more likely a daily timing issue versus a seasonal issue. That's one thing I hear a lot of fishermen talk about is, oh, there's bugs in everywhere, but the fish just didn't seem to want to eat it. Well, you probably were fishing them during the middle of the day and fishing it out too far. More than likely, you need to be fishing right where you're standing and fish it in the evening, in the mornings, in the low light conditions.
So in other words,
later in the hatch. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you. If you've got bugs flying and it's hot and it's high sun, you would almost say take a seat, take a nap, take a sandwich, eat a little bit, wait up, and definitely hit. Don't try and stay in that area and fish that area. The last couple hours of dark, because if you've got bugs flying during the day, they're going to be right there flying right at last couple hours.
Oh yeah, exactly. And if those bugs are around in that whole area too, the beauty of the canyon is it keeps all those bugs on the water. All they can do is go up or down, and so they pretty much have to travel the river corridor. So as they start dying too, which happens, later in the hatch, that kind of third, week on, even second, third week, fourth week into the hatch, later in the season, you'll get more and more of those adults dying. So you'll get fish, just cleaning up those bugs throughout the day as well. So you kind of got to fish a little harder for them, but they're still eating. But your best chance for catching that hatch, if you're struggling on a daily basis and you're seeing a ton of bugs and you're just wondering what's going on, best thing to do is, like I said, just take a nap, wait for that low light to happen, and then start working it tight to the bank, tight to the grass, wherever those stoneflies are just going to have a nice easy slip right into the water, and the fish is going to take advantage of them.
What would you say on your, fishing the hatch for 3 weeks? How many of the trips are overnight, couple day trips, and how many of them are, just day trips, running up from the bottom? You guys have a service. I'm pretty sure you guys have a service that runs people up from the bottom on an airboat, and then can drop your raft, and then you float down. How much of the hatch is our day trips, and how much do you do our overnight?
We do actually a lot of jet boat trips, especially earlier in the season when that hatch is lower in that river system. The jet boat is allowed to run 4 miles up that lower end of the river to what we call Smith Fork. And really you hit a rapid just above there, which you're not really going to be able to run the jet boat above. So we do a ton of trips down there. But I personally am a canyon guide, so I'm up in the canyon. But we do a ton of trips up there too. We're allowed to launch 4 boats a day, and we're pretty much booked out the entire month. So
yeah,
we stay busy. Yep.
For sure. Most canyon trips that you're in the canyon, how many days are most of the canyon trips, and how much water do you cover in those days? And then do you always take out at all the way down at Pleasure Park? I mean, you float it all the way out, or do you get do you hike? I mean, I'm curious, do you hike back up and come around, or do you always come out the bottom and then start back up at the top again?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, so we run the float in the canyon is 14 miles. So we actually start our trips up in Chucker Trail, which is about a half an hour drive, maybe a little bit longer from Pleasure Park, which is located right at the confluence, which is where the fly shop and everything is located, conveniently right where we take out. So we actually kind of take out right where we pretty much meet people, and so it's kind of a nice fancy loop.
Gotcha.
But yeah, it's 14 miles up in the canyon, and most people, yeah, they do 3-day trips. We do a lot of 2-day trips. Usually we don't do too many 1-dayers through there, just because it's pretty much a long day, because we got to meet at Pleasure Park early in the morning and drive all the way down in the Chucker Trail and then hike in, get in the boat and row all the way through the whole 14 miles. So if you're going to do it, usually you want to, spend a few days, definitely enjoy the beauty of the canyon, and you get to enjoy those early and last light fishing opportunities as well. So.
Gotcha. For those people listening, if you hike down from Chucker Trail, how far of a hike is it? And it's straight down, isn't it? Switchbacks all the way down?
Yeah, Chucker Trail, it's not terrible. It is 1.2 miles down to the river. There's a little switchback section at the top, and then it really, honestly, you hit a wash and it flattens right out, and you're kind of walking through gravel. We had kind of a big rain event that kind of washed out a couple of the little spots there that were inconvenient, so it all kind of made it a nice little wash. But it's really not too bad. I've seen 8-year-olds run down it, and I've seen 80-year-olds take their time to get down it as well. So it can be done. And also handicaps, we also can put you on a horse and get you down the trail as well. So
nice. Now, so you've got the Pleasure Park, you've got the Smith Fork, then you've got Chucker Trail, and then as you go up the canyon, are there any say from East Portal down, can guide trips even float that, or is that not even acceptable from, say, the East Portal down to Chucker Trail?
yeah, that's a great question. We often get asked that one as well. And no, there's no guiding allowed within the national park. The national park is from what you just said, the East Portal down to Chucker Trail. The Chucker Trail downstream is designated as BLM ground, the Gunnison Gorge Management Area, and we are allowed to guide in there. And boaters beware if you're trying to boat through the Black Canyon, put in at the East Portal. There's 25-foot waterfalls, and supposedly the river goes underneath a bunch of rocks. I haven't been to that section of the canyon yet, but it's what people tell me.
So I mean, it's not like on your day off you can go up, you not guiding, just going up on your own. You could put in at the East Portal and float down. It's not passable.
Yeah, it's not. Kayakers do it, and there's another like 7 miles in or something. You got to do a mile portage through a bunch of poison ivy, and yeah, it's if you really want to look it up, there's a couple of YouTube videos of guys running through there in kayaks, and it's really pretty gnarly stuff. But there is several access points as far as hiking in trails, which are pretty formidable trails to get into. The best access by far is definitely the East Portal, and the next easiest access is probably the Chucker Trail, and there's several other access points within the Gunnison Gorge to access the river as well on foot.
You mentioned some of the videos I've watched on YouTube. You mentioned poison ivy, and the other thing is rattlesnakes, both of which I believe you have poison ivy and rattlesnakes. Can you speak to that?
Yes, that is part of our daily speech with clients down there. So there is plenty of poison ivy down there. If you're unfamiliar with it, you should have time to look it up ahead of time and look what see what it is. There is plenty of it down there. I advise you to just wear pants when we wet wade. I wear pants down there even though it's hot. Waders get super hot when it's 100 degrees down there. They're kind of unnecessary, but shorts can get you in trouble. And even be cautious when you're walking around. It's tall enough to be, some areas it's literally head high. So you got to be cautious around some of those areas.
Is
And
it inevitable that you're going to
rabbits.
get it?
No, not necessarily. As long as you know what it looks like and you can avoid it, you're not just walking through brush, not paying attention. You definitely. Some areas, honestly, though, are way worse than others, and usually you can pay attention and avoid it.
Okay.
So, and there is trails along the river. There's like a little path where you can see where other fishermen have kind of walked around it and avoided it usually. So,
how much of your fishing from Chucker down is actually out of the boat in where you actually never even get out of the boat with clients and you're in the raft all day, or is it more you go to float down to a spot fishing and then you get out and fish gravel bars and stuff, or how much once you're in the boat, are you constantly just float fishing out of the boat, or are you getting out a lot?
a little of both, definitely. So if say we're doing a 3-day trip and we're only doing 14 miles, we definitely need to get out and, fish some shoreline. And honestly, you can fish a lot of our pocket water and stuff a lot better from shore than you can out of a boat. Some of our best fishing in the canyon is right along the Whitewater Rapids. So a lot of times what we'll do is we'll either park ahead of the rapid and kick people out and let them fish back up the rapid to us, or go through the rapid and then park the boat and get out and fish back up the rapid. And that seems to work really well for us. But then we can get out at camp too, and there's a lot of shorelines that will just kind of let you get out and fish, a couple 100 yards because you might be cliffed out. Little sections that you can't access otherwise other than being in the boat. But yeah, we fish a fair mix of both. Honestly, I kind of let clients tell me what they want to do, if they like fishing out of the boat or if they like getting out and walking. So
I assume you're talking about fishing next to the rapids and the whitewater. I would assume on the edges where those soft pockets are, because there's so much moving water in, say, the middle of the water column. You've got those pockets, and it just creates a perfect pillow and stuff for fish to just sit and just gorge on bugs.
Exactly, perfect ambush spot for those big stoneflies to come washing down. And the other thing I've learned, as we're kind of talking about this too, a big secret to fishing this hatch is fishing what we call dumpster lane. So you might have a big run above you that looks super sweet, and there's bugs falling along it, and you're watching it, and you're like, well, why aren't these bugs getting eaten by fish? Well, that fish might be 100 yards below that. He might be down the next rapid below that where all those bugs are still getting washed down the river system, and he knows where to sit down in that lunch lane and clean up those bugs and clean up those bugs and clean them up and clean them up. And he doesn't have to go anywhere searching for them. They come to him. And finding those spots has taken, that's some of the experience that the guides have, obviously. But finding those cleanup lanes is very crucial. And in those rapids, you're not going to have a lot of stoneflies, flying around right in those rapids, dropping into the rapids or whatever. But that's where those fish know that those bugs above them are getting washed down into those holes and whatnot, So it's a very good spot for fish and stoneflies. So they come together good in those spots.
For sure. Let's talk the bugs themselves, and let's talk about the flies that you use. Are there any tricks of the trade as far as colors or sizes or any little special, things that you do to trick your flies out to? I know I'm going double top secret here, but is there any
No worries.
any colors or anything that little things, clip the legs, leave the legs, short wings, long wings? Is there anything that you say, on average you want to have this fly to have more success in the canyon?
Yeah, that's perfect. So early season, you're definitely probably going to be dealing with dirty water, and it can be pretty discouraging, especially trying to fish dry flies. One of my best dirty water patterns are more sparkly patterns, Chernobyl patterns with a really sparkly bottom. Still kind of that orangey color, because stonefly or salmon flies are orange on the bottom, and orange and black are pretty much their basic colors. Orange is obviously going to stand out better than black, and those fish will literally get to a point where they eat anything orange. You can throw orange, whatever you want out there, and they'll flash at it at some point. But yeah, so orange is definitely a key factor. Flashier, kind of sparkly patterns definitely work better, and dirtier water, kind of earlier in the hatch, catch their attention. But once those fish kind of see enough of those bugs, they'll actually kind of shy away from those sparkly, flashy patterns. So they'll kind of get back to your more natural, what we call like flush floaters, or, more natural looking, more realistic ties. And you actually sometimes might have to take a magic marker to them. This is definitely one of our guide secrets there. Take a magic marker to them and make them a little darker, make them a little bit more black. Those fish, like I said, they'll come up and see that orange, and it'll be too bright for them, and they'll actually deny your fly and go back down and realize that it's a fake one. So sometimes just darkening up that fly just a little bit can make all the difference in the world.
What size, Eli, are you fishing mainly?
A lot of 2s and 4s. Definitely big flies. It's a big bug, like we were talking about earlier. It's the size of your pinky to your middle finger. So you want to match that hatch. You're better going off bigger than you are small. The other thing with this hatch is it does bring some of the biggest fish in the river system to the surface and to the feed lanes. So you want to be focusing on those trophy trout. If you're fishing a tiny little fly, what happens a lot of times you'll get, 12 inches, little 14 inches. Sure, they're fun to catch, but that's they'll come up and steal your fly before the big one can actually grab it. Sometimes when you fish those bigger flies, those little fish won't even attempt to eat it, or they'll just come up and bump it, and you can let your fly ride, and all of a sudden that big boy's like, I'm taking that one. And there you go.
Suck it down.
And you also, yeah, exactly. And you also want a big hook to keep these fish hooked as well. But always remember to pinch your barbs on those big hooks, because it definitely helps.
For sure. Let's talk. Leader and tippet length, and what are you using 2x or using 4x, or what are you using? I would assume early in the season, early in the hatch, you can use pretty big heavy tippet, and then as it progresses, you use lighter stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Like we're saying, kind of beefing everything up, beefing up your flies. You got to match your tippet to that as well. Big aggressive browns, they got their big teeth out. You want to be fishing. A lot of times I won't even go shy away from 1X. Some of the other guides I guide with, later in season after the fish, they definitely kind of get a little bit more picky. You'll kind of have to go down to maybe 3X. But then you're risking,
breaking a
fish busting you off. Yeah. And the other thing we deal with a lot down there on those float trips is you're fishing a lot against canyon walls, against those cliff walls. So you're trying to slam your fly right against the corner where that cliff wall meets the water line. And it's really abrasive rocks, and it chews leaders apart. And you literally bust eyes off of hooks, bust your hooks right at the bend in the hook. I literally have seen it all. And so beefing up your leaders to 1X, 0X is definitely a big advantage down there. And if you're getting denied and not having fish eat it, maybe go down a little bit, but go with the biggest you can get away with.
Talk to me about length from the tip of your fly line to the fly in most situations.
Perfect. Yep. Yep. I definitely like to keep it shorter. Turning over those big flies with a big, long 7-foot, 9-foot leader is just kind of daunting, and it's very hard to get your accuracy with it. It's just a very wind-resistant fly. I like to keep it a little shorter. A lot of times I'll take tapered leaders and, cut a little bit of section off either the butt section or the actual tapered end to make it a little bit stouter. Take a 1X leader, cut about 2 feet off of it, and you got yourself a pretty good salmon fly leader.
So total length 5 feet or 4 feet?
Yeah, I would say to the dry. And if you're fishing, if you're fishing the dry to the dropper rig, you can get away with shortening up that dry fly leader. It'll help turn over those 2 big flies a little bit better as well. And you'll get better hookups as well, too, because you'll have less slack on the water and everything. And it definitely it seems to have helped me over the years for sure.
Okay, here's a question for you. Do you ever get greedy and fish double dries?
Oh, yeah, all the time. Yeah.
The same
Yeah,
fly, or do you go with a bigger one and a little bit smaller one to back it up, or what do you typically do?
So awesome question. Yeah, so later in the season, what happens, as the salmon flies progress, what happens next is the golden stones, which is kind of our hidden little secret down there. The golden stones is almost just as thick of a hatch as the salmon fly hatch down there. So a lot of times what we'll do once we start seeing goldens is we'll go with the salmon fly and a golden stone, right? And then you'll kind of notice later in the hatch that they'll just start eating that golden almost over the salmon fly every time. And that's usually a great way to go. But, yeah, you can fish the double salmon fly. Even a caddis in the evening can pull a lot of fish as well. And mixing up your sizes and different colors, yeah, these fish, they really aren't too picky when the hatch is going. They just want something in that size and right in their grill, and they'll crush it.
That's awesome. Is it
Yeah.
common? Is it common in the middle of the season when it's just prime, that prime 5 days or 7 days or whatever, when it's just really on? Is it what kind of day is common? Is it common to catch, 20 or 30 fish, or is it common to catch more than that? And then the follow-up question is, like, in an average day of fishing when it's just on, are you catching a lot of 14, 15, 16-inch fish, or are you catching a lot of, 17, 18-inch fish? What are you looking at?
Yeah, so one of my judges of knowing when the hatches, say, like we're saying, the prime time of the hatches, you literally won't be catching fish under 16 inches. Your average fish will be 16, pushing 24s. Like I said, we've even seen a few bigger. We've been chasing a rainbow of legend. I don't want to say how big he is, but he's pushing over 30. But we've been chasing him for a few years. But yeah, we you just never really know what can happen. Yeah, you're gonna have little fish kind of battling over it, but for the most part, when the fishing's on in there, yeah, we're searching for those 16, 17, 18-inch, just thick, healthy brown, and occasionally big rainbows, and But yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot what your other part of the question was.
Well, you answered it. I was asking, numbers of fish and then size of fish.
Oh yeah, numbers of fish. Yeah, so when it's on in there, it's not uncommon to see. It depends on your angler a lot, and you can go for streaks of missing a lot of fish too. It kind of happens a lot down there with the big fly and the big fish. Sometimes you just screw it up, but it's not uncommon to see anywhere from 20, 30 fish, before lunch some days.
Wow.
Some days in the evening, I've had a few trips where it's literally gone off, and it's like you're pushing 70, 80 fish.
Oh my
in a
gosh.
day. Yeah.
Wow.
And it's literally come to the point where, I took my brother down there one trip, and he literally couldn't hang on to the rod anymore. These fish, when they hit, some of these holes you're fishing in are, 20 feet deep, and you're fishing along a cliff wall, and they're suspended above that 20-foot of water, and they just are sitting there right below the cliff wall waiting for it. And you hit them, As soon as they get hooked up with, they go straight under your boat right down to the bottom. You're just trying to lift a weight.
And they're so full of energy because they've been getting good protein. They're full of spunk,
Yeah,
aren't they? Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Some of the hardest fighting fish. It's really quite hard to explain.
Now, are they in the canyon? Are they acrobats? I mean, do they really like to jump and get out of the water, or do they just put their nose down and go deep?
You'll get, honestly, you'll get a mixed bag. These fish, you'll get a lot of fish that just pull super hard, just dig, dig, dig. And then all of a sudden you'll get a brown that just, he's skying 3-4 feet out of the water. But they definitely like to pull hard, especially, and they know how to use that current to their advantage, And like we were talking about earlier too, some of our biggest fish are caught in those rapids. So when you hook those fish in those rapids, sometimes they get out in that current and just wrap you around rocks and just never, never to be seen again.
For sure. What
Yeah.
what weight rod do you recommend your clients fish? What weight rod?
I definitely recommend 5 or 6. I prefer personally a 6, just because you kind of got to beef everything up. You're fishing big flies, the bigger fish. It's nice to have that little bit more oomph to it. But we get away with 5 weights all the time as well. So either or.
Gotcha. That it just sounds like an incredible time, and I know salmonfly hatches all across the West in different rivers. I spent some time in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and I'm actually going there this September and October. But
Mm-hmm.
I remember asking a guide there on the South Fork, what's this, the salmonfly hatch like here, and he just looked up. He was at the cash register, and he looks up and he goes, "It'll change your life." That's all he said. With a smile, "It'll change your life."
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Moving on from the salmonfly hatch, I assume they kind of lull out a little bit after, gorging so much. Throughout the summer, then does it switch to a lot of caddis fishery and PMD fishery and such? And can you also get some exceptional days as the summer progresses? Or is it
Yeah,
grasshoppers, or
exactly.
what's the deal?
Yeah, the gorge actually does fish really well most of the summer. Unfortunately, it does get pretty hot down there come July and August, so you're definitely dealing with the heat. But the fish definitely continue to feed, and it can be really good during that time of year. Like I said, the hoppers, literally as soon as the salmonfly hatch and the golden stones kind of peter out, which is usually about that 3rd week of June into that 4th week of June, you'll have kind of, it'll seem like a lull, even though the fishing's still not that bad. We just have to switch our game a little bit. And so, yeah, you'll get PMDs come right after that, yellow sallies by the thousands, which is it's pretty biblical hatch down here as well. And then next you have the hoppers. The Black Canyon is can be hit or miss depending on years, depending on just how hoppers kind of come and go. It can be good in the canyon. It can be kind of hit or miss. Some of the best hopper fishing is the lower portions of that river system, and that's where the jet boat trips come in pretty handy. And we can even start fishing from that confluence down the next 10-15 miles downstream. That becomes a lot more fishable because the North Fork clears. So.
Gotcha. Well, it sounds like the little that I have fished it, it's an amazing place, and it sounds it gets me excited just talking about it, and it's been great
Yep.
talking to you. You also do some guiding in Gunnison and around Gunnison itself. When typically do you pull out of the canyon and guide and fish more on the Gunnison River, say above Blue Mesa and some of the water up there? What time of year is that?
Yeah, so I finish usually in the gorge about that last week of June. After the salmonflies, stoneflies kind of peter out, I'll shift gears back up to the upper Gunnison up here and start following the green drake hatch, which usually is about that last week of June. into that first week of July, the green drakes and PMDs on our river system can just be going really, really thick by then. And so then we'll start following that hatch up here. And that's honestly, our river system up here has become a really good dry fly fishery in the last several years. We've kind of dealt with a few issues with mosquito spraying out of a helicopter, and we got with our Trout Unlimited chapter and got that stopped, and our bugs have come back a big time, and our dry fly fishing has become really, really productive the last few years. So it's been really fun.
That's cool. One of my favorite rivers, in I guess the whole world, that one of my favorite rivers is the Lake Fork of the Gunnison.
That's right.
Between Lake City and the lake, and it's a phenomenal fishery as well. Smaller water, but just a beautiful place as well. Do you ever get up there?
Oh, yes, quite a bit. I try not to talk too much about it now.
Yeah,
but
it's got a lot of
is,
private property, and there's not a ton of public access, but it's a beautiful place.
Yep.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, it's been awesome talking to you about the fishing, and I can just tell that you're ready for it to happen. We just had rain and snow, and do you think that will push the Salmonfly Hatch back, or do you think it won't affect it at all? I'm curious with the weather that we've been having here in Colorado the last couple days with all the snow and such, kind of a late, cold snap and snow. Do you think it will prolong the hatch or make it later, or do you think it'll kick it off right on time?
I don't think this current weather is going to have too much effect. I think we're out just a little too far, as far as with the water still being in full runoff down there. Really, it's more of a water conditions thing than an environmental conditions thing. But yeah, as far as when that water drops and that does start to happen and the hatch is going, I definitely have seen it where we hit a 3-day rainstorm and literally the hatch puts the brakes on. It definitely can kill the hatch. And I've seen it go the other way as well. I've seen it where it's super hot and the river's pretty low and the water's warm. And I've seen the hatch literally blow through the 14 miles in 3 days. Yeah. So it can happen, but I think this year it's going to be the way the water is. And, I think it's going to be a pretty normal year where it's going to be, first week of June through that third week of June, it's going to be on. So.
Well, that's awesome. I look forward to seeing your pictures on Instagram. Want to tell the listeners you can follow Eli on his Instagram at Wilder. That's WILDER_Eli. And if people want to contact you, I assume they can contact you right through Instagram. How else should people get a hold of you if they want to look into a guided trip?
You can just shoot me an email at ECWILDER, that's ECWilder at MSN.com.
Give it to me one more time, Eli.
It's ECWILDER at MSN.com.
Okay, that's fantastic. Well, man, thanks for sharing with us and spending some time and telling us about the Black Canyon. And it's fun following you on Instagram. And I encourage those people listening that are, fishing junkies, follow Eli because he's got some phenomenal fish pictures here on his Instagram, and you can tell he's all in on this deal, and it's fun to watch. So wish you and your fishing buddies and guiding buddies the best of success this season coming up, and I'll be staying in touch and watching your progress. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you again, Jay. Good talking with you.
All right, buddy. Take care. Okay.
All righty. Have a good one. Tight lines.
All right, buddy.
All right. Thank you.